President. International Men's Day. I'm really proud to have put International Men's Day on the South Australian landscape the past 2 years with sold-out events weeks in advance of the night. This year's event raised almost $15,000 for Lifeline, and it was heartening to hear from the CEO that every $100 will go to an hour of expert suicide intervention services. I'm grateful to Legacy for being the charity partner in the previous year. I've always been clear, Mr. President, that International Men's Day should not be a political event. It's pretty obvious from communicating with the public that men and women of all different political persuasions are supportive of an event like this on the calendar. I particularly want to thank my parliamentary colleagues from both sides of politics who this year turned out to show their support, and of course the gracious panel and speakers who shared their stories openly and for no fee. Mr. President, it was a most fantastic crowd and atmosphere that gathered on the recent evening of November 19th, International Men's Day. Times have changed, Mr. President, and progress has been made in terms of the promotion of the acceptance of men talking about their feelings, especially if they're feeling depressed or anxious. Much work still needs to be done on available services and funding inequalities, but certainly from my observation and interactions, particularly with groups such as Men's Sheds, it's remarkable and moving to see how much more accepted reaching out for help and admitting one is struggling for men has become. But like one stakeholder told me, it's time to move on from a focus primarily on awareness to tangible implementation of effective services and policies. I commend the government on some recent contributions and advances they have undertaken in this area, including, but not limited to, their financial support of a fellowship into male suicide. I remember growing up with my father trying to instill in me that stress was not real and was merely a sort of fabrication by the mind that just needed to be discarded as a sort of malfunctioning of the brain and to not really pay too much attention to this imagined stress. It's a great thing that times have changed, and I think my father would have been shocked but ultimately comforted by the open discussions that seem to be occurring in men's sheds today. But what of the conversation about celebrating men? What if for a moment we as a society want to take a break from the doom and gloom statistics on men and shine a light on the enormous contribution men are making to society individually and as a society at large? Are we allowed to? It seems some would rather not. Thankfully, I believe the individuals who want all men to stay in a corner riddled with collective guilt over the actions of a few are in the minority, but some of them have been given the privileged position of speaking to us at large. I've spoken extensively about the positive contributions of men, both in Parliament and out of Parliament, as fathers, workers, members of the Defence Force, brothers, sons, friends, and so on. I do feel strongly about this, Mr. President. For my own son, for example, 9 years old. My son, Mr. President, is the most sensitive of my 3 children. His empathy and love for me and his sisters is the best gift I could have asked for, and I intend to nurture it for my remaining days. I do not want my son feeling a collective guilt and shame for simply being male. This sentiment is shared by mothers everywhere and of all political and religious or non-religious identifications. This is because it's simply about loving your child and wanting the best for them. There are many damning statistics regarding men, and I won't repeat them all here. I do, however, just want to focus on a couple. 7 out of 9 suicides are men. The leading cause of death amongst men aged 15 to 44 in Australia is suicide. 15 to 44. This statistic instills fear into every mother and father and indicates clearly the tragedy of men who are leaving their young families and partners behind. I've spoken of my own vulnerabilities as a young person, Mr. President, and want to revisit that briefly. I remember sitting in maths class in Year 10. I was failing and going nowhere. I've spoken of my great teacher, Mr. Wethered, before and how he helped turn my life around. But there is an important person missing from the story, Toby. Toby was tall and good-looking. He was just so smart and kind to everyone. I, on the other hand, seemed and felt quite frankly a bit messed up and as though I was throwing my opportunities away. Luckily for me, Toby was in my mathematics class. I can't deny Mr. Weathered's willingness to see me at recess and lunch with all my mathematical queries, but it was Toby who really took the load. Sitting in front of me and having essentially mastered 4-unit mathematics in Year 10, he was more than willing to be on tap for any questions I had as a failing student who up until then had done away with trying at school. I changed schools in Year 11, but Toby and Mr. Weathered had put me in good stead, and I achieved full marks in Year 12 3-unit mathematics. When I bumped into Toby at the start of my first year at the University of Sydney to study veterinary science, I thought, well, good luck. He told me he was studying an advanced mathematics degree. I should have thanked Toby for helping me achieve my then dream of becoming a veterinarian. Shortly after I heard from another school friend, Toby had been found at a holiday spot he frequented with his family. Apparently he'd been battling depression and anxiety, and from what I gathered from a heartfelt poem he'd written that was read out at his funeral. He was the only child, Mr. President, of his grieving parents. I know there are simply too many similar stories. The thing is, if we want things to get better, we can't simply have a conversation that only allows either the demonising of men or allowing airspace for men to vent their mental demise. For things to get better, it's my belief that the narrative around men must change and positive conversation must be allowed. Positive events must be allowed. In organising this event, Mr. President, while juggling my 3 children and parliamentary duties during the school holidays, I was notified of a disappointing local radio segment featuring 2 presenters. When I finally got my hands on the segment, it was worse than I'd imagined. And the following is a transcript from part of the segment between David Pentheby and Will Gooding. It says, "It's this International Men's Day thing. It's not like a sort of, ban all immigrants or abolish native title event. But it's One Nation that have organised by Sarah Game MLC. She's thrown in her lot with this International Men's Day event, which is something which as a bloke, I got to say, I find it's a bit dubious." It then goes on, maybe when a bloke gets murdered once every 4 days by his partner, we should start thinking seriously about, or maybe when men won't go to court in the event that they've been sexually assaulted because they don't want to go through the process of giving evidence about their female attacker. When men have to grapple with issues like that, maybe then we need International Men's Day. Until then, maybe we don't. That's just my opinion. Many will disagree, but I don't think too many of them are female, though. I would say, Mr. President, that many mothers, sisters and daughters will disagree, as well as many men who have also contacted me with their serious disappointment at listening to that conversation. I was going to comment further on that, Mr. President, but really they've said it all themselves. I'm proud of this International Men's Day event, and I'm grateful to everyone who helped make it a success, including all of those within these parliamentary walls.